Welcome back to the Whispers of the White House, where we delve into the lives of history's most fascinating figures and the scandals that shaped their legacies. I'm your host, Dr. Wisdom, and today we're taking a look at one of America's most controversial presidents, Grover Cleveland. On one hand, he's remembered for his impressive accomplishments as the only president to serve two non-consecutive terms. On the other, his presidency was tainted by an affair that rocked the nation and turned into one of the most salacious scandals of the 19th century. Buckle up as we dive into the rise, fall, and eventual redemption of Grover Cleveland. Let's get started. Grover Cleveland stands out in American history as the only president to serve two non-consecutive terms, first from 1885 to 1889, and then again from 1893 to 1897. That is, until now with Trump's election. This unique achievement alone cements his and Trump's places as historical outliers. But Cleveland's legacy extends beyond this quirk of electoral history. He was known for his fierce independence and a reputation for integrity, qualities that stood in stark contrast to the entrenched political machines of his time. His leadership style was rooted in principle rather than partisanship, often placing him at odds with his own party as well as his political opponents. One of Cleveland's most defining characteristics as president was his unwavering commitment to fiscal responsibility. He wielded the veto pen with unmatched vigor, rejecting over 300 bills during his first term alone. Cleveland's aggressive use of veto power signaled his resolve to curb unnecessary government spending. Unlike many of his predecessors, he rejected pork barrel projects and stood firmly against measures he deemed wasteful or self-serving. His staunch advocacy for a limited federal government placed him in direct conflict with a Congress accustomed to unchecked spending. Cleveland's vetoes were seen as a bold assertion of executive power, and his stand against patronage earned him both respect and resentment. Cleveland's rise to the presidency was fueled by a well-earned reputation as a crusader against political corruption. As mayor of Buffalo, New York, he quickly became known as the veto mayor for his refusal to sign off on corrupt contracts and wasteful expenditures. His no-nonsense approach to governance carried over to his tenure as governor of New York, where he challenged the entrenched power of party bosses and refused to make backroom deals. By the time he entered the White House, Cleveland had established himself as a man of unshakable integrity, a rare commodity in the patronage-driven politics of the Gilded Age. This reputation became both a strength and a burden, as his moral image would be tested in the years to come. Cleveland's second term was marked by one of the most challenging economic crises of the era, the Panic of 1893. The Depression triggered widespread bank failures, business closures, and soaring unemployment. Cleveland believed that the root cause of the crisis was the Sherman Silver Purchase Act, which required the government to buy large amounts of silver, inflating the money supply and destabilizing the economy. Against intense public and political opposition, Cleveland championed the repeal of the act, believing it was necessary for the long-term stability of the nation's economy. While his decision was unpopular with many in his party, it underscored his willingness to pursue difficult, politically costly solutions in the face of crisis. Cleveland's handling of labor relations remains one of the most controversial aspects of his presidency. In 1894, the Pullman strike, a nationwide railroad boycott, disrupted commerce and mail delivery, threatening the economy. Cleveland's decision to send federal troops to break the strike was met with fierce backlash from labor advocates, who viewed it as a betrayal of workers' rights. For Cleveland, the move was about maintaining order and ensuring that essential services continued. But the violent crackdown on strikers drew sharp criticism from unions and progressives. The incident left a lasting stain on his reputation among labor groups, revealing the tension between his commitment to law and order and his willingness to use force against American workers. While Cleveland's integrity and political courage were hallmarks of his presidency, his personal life would occasionally overshadow his public image. From controversies about his private affairs to his hardline stance on labor, Cleveland's reputation as a principled leader was repeatedly tested. Nevertheless, his legacy endures as one of the most distinct in presidential history. His commitment to limited government, his crusade against corruption, and his controversial but resolute economic reforms paint a portrait of a leader who valued principle over popularity. Today, Cleveland is remembered not just as the president who served two non-consecutive terms, but as a man who stood firm against the tides of political expediency. Now, let's dive into the scandal that nearly derailed Cleveland's first campaign and dogged him throughout his political career, his affair with Maria Halpin. Grover Cleveland's 1884 presidential campaign was rocked by a scandal that could have ended his political career before it truly began. The controversy centered on his affair with Maria Halpin, a widow and store clerk from Buffalo, New York. The affair occurred in 1874, long before Cleveland became a national political figure, but it returned to haunt him at the most critical moment of his life. The situation became even more contentious when Halpin gave birth to a son, naming him Oscar Folsom Cleveland, a name that clearly implicated Cleveland as the father. The story quickly spread, fueled by Cleveland's political opponents, and became a key line of attack for the Republican Party. As salacious details emerged, the public was captivated by the image of a family values candidate caught in a web of scandal and secrecy. When confronted with the allegations, Cleveland took a bold but unusual approach for a 19th century politician. He told his advisors to tell the truth. This strategy was risky, but it aligned with his reputation as a man of integrity. Cleveland admitted to having had a relationship with Halpin, but claimed that other men in his social circle had also been involved with her. His admission was seen as a calculated effort to spread responsibility for the situation, though critics argued it was a way to dodge accountability. What made the matter worse was the way Cleveland allegedly handled the aftermath. Reports claimed that he had used his political influence to have Halpin forcibly placed in a mental institution, which Halpin later described as an abuse of power. Cleveland, however, denied these claims, maintaining that he had merely provided financial support for the child out of a sense of moral obligation. The Republican Party seized on the scandal, launching one of the most memorable and cutting political taunts in U.S. history. They circulated the chant, "Ma, Ma, where's my pa?" a biting reference to Cleveland's alleged abandonment of his illegitimate child. The chant was echoed in newspapers, stump speeches, and political cartoons, spreading the scandal far and wide. In an era when personal morality was considered a reflection of public virtue, Cleveland's private life became a public spectacle. Opponents painted him as immoral and unfit for the presidency. It was a deeply personal attack, and Cleveland's opponents hoped it would turn voters against him. Unlike many politicians of the era who might have denied, concealed, or deflected blame, Cleveland's approach to the scandal was straightforward. Instead of issuing denials or offering half-truths, he openly admitted to the affair while disputing key elements of the story. His advisors suggested more evasive tactics, but Cleveland famously told them, "Tell the truth." This directness had a surprising effect on public opinion. Some voters saw his honesty as proof of his character, a rare commodity in an era when political corruption and cronyism were rampant. Instead of crumbling under the weight of scandal, Cleveland leaned into his reputation as a man of integrity. His willingness to face the music resonated with voters, allowing him to maintain public support even as the Republican attack machine worked overtime to sink his campaign. As the 1884 election drew to a close, Cleveland's response to the scandal began to shift the narrative. While his opponents chanted, "Ma, Ma, where's my pa?" with glee, Cleveland's supporters ultimately had the last laugh. After he won the election, his backers flipped the chant into a triumphant slogan of their own, "Gone to the White House, ha, ha, ha." The mockery became a symbol of Cleveland's resilience in the face of adversity. His victory not only vindicated his campaign strategy but also revealed a shift in the public's expectations of political leaders. Voters were willing to look past moral imperfections if they believed a candidate was honest and principled. By owning his mistakes, Cleveland set a precedent for how modern politicians might confront scandal, admit it, face it, and move forward. While Cleveland emerged victorious in the election, the Halpin affair left a lasting mark on his legacy. It introduced the concept of personal scandal as a legitimate line of political attack. a strategy that would resurface time and again in future elections. But Cleveland's response also provided a counterexample of how honesty, even in the face of public disgrace, can neutralize a political bombshell. His supporters viewed his conduct as proof of his strength of character, while his critics continued to question his integrity. Beyond the election, the scandal served as a reminder of the double-edged nature of personal responsibility in politics. For Cleveland, it demonstrated that public trust could be preserved even after a scandal, if a leader embraced transparency. Today, his handling of the Halpin affair is remembered as one of the boldest and most unusual responses to a political scandal in American history. Now, why was this such a big deal? Today, a political scandal involving a love child and an extramarital affair wouldn't be entirely shocking, though it would certainly make headlines. But in the 19th century, this kind of scandal could ruin a political career. Cleveland's response and the timing of the affair raised questions about his moral character, particularly in an era when Victorian ideals about sexuality and propriety were dominant. One reason the scandal gained so much traction was the growing power of the press. Newspapers were beginning to have a more significant influence on public opinion, and muckraking journalism, digging up dirt on politicians, was becoming a popular tactic in political campaigns. The media frenzy around Cleveland's affair with Halpin was unprecedented at the time and became one of the first major sex scandals of American politics. There's also the issue of Cleveland's honesty. While he admitted to the affair, the accusations about how he treated Halpin, such as possibly having her committed, led some to question his integrity, which was ironic given that his political career had been built on fighting corruption. Despite the affair, Cleveland managed to emerge relatively unscathed from the scandal. His frank admission of the relationship, coupled with his reputation as a reformer, helped to diffuse the worst of the political fallout. Interestingly, the public seemed more willing to forgive Cleveland for his personal transgressions because they viewed him as a straight shooter in politics. Cleveland's ability to weather the storm can also be attributed to the fact that he had no official wife or family at the time of the affair, which made it somewhat easier for the public to reconcile. And, of course, his eventual marriage to Frances Folsom, the daughter of his longtime friend and former law partner Oscar Folsom, gave him an air of domestic respectability that helped to smooth over lingering doubts about his personal life. Still, the scandal never fully went away. Even after Cleveland won his second non-consecutive term, whispers about Maria Halpin and their alleged child remained part of the conversation around his legacy. So how do we remember Grover Cleveland today? His affair with Maria Halpin is certainly part of his legacy, but it's balanced by his impressive accomplishments as a president who prioritized integrity, fiscal responsibility, and reform. He was a man of contradictions, fiercely dedicated to cleaning up political corruption, yet caught in a personal scandal that could have ended his career. Cleveland's ability to navigate the affair, maintain public trust, and serve 2 non-consecutive terms makes him one of the more resilient figures in U.S. political history. And while the "Ma, Ma, where's my pa" chants may have echoed through the 1884 election, Cleveland's triumph in the face of scandal serves as a reminder that sometimes voters are willing to look beyond personal failings if they believe in the character and policies of a candidate. Well, that wraps up today's episode of The Whispers of the White House. Grover Cleveland's journey from political reformer to embroiled in a sex scandal and his eventual redemption serves as an early example of how personal and political lives often collide in unexpected ways. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. Join us next time as we uncover more untold stories and hidden scandals from history's most fascinating figures. Thanks for listening, and until next time, stay curious and stay wise.